Hi, my name is Dr. Claudia Sonder, and I'm the president of the Napa Community Animal Response Team. And today we're going to review a red flag day routine for those of you that have horses. A red flag day declaration happens when fire conditions are ripe and when there's a high likelihood of fire to spread if ignited. Usually that's going to be a combination of high wind, low humidity, and high fire fuels out in the environment. At times it can be a combination of that and other factors such as the propensity for a lightning strike. So if you are living in Napa County and a red flag day is announced, then it's important to have a routine to go through with your animals so that you're ready to evacuate. Evacuating with animals takes more time and more preparation, and so our hope is that this is something that becomes a plan. You drill it with your animal, and then you, your family, and your animals are ready if you have to leave. One of the first things to consider once a red flag day is declared is, will you have power? And as you know, your horses drink approximately 20 gallons a day each on a hot day. And so if you are on a well or if you're on city water, you need to have a plan to get water to your animals for a couple of days. And a good rule of thumb is to have one 100-gallon trough for each horse. If you can do that, that's 5 days of water for each horse. If you can't, if you can at least fill 3 days of water for each horse, so approximately 60 gallons per horse, that's a good plan, as we won't know how long power will be out in some of these situations. The next part of planning for a red flag day routine is to make sure that you have all of your horses' halters and lead ropes up and ready. You want to make sure that you have the right size and the right equipment for each horse, and they should be readily accessible to you. It's also important that you have in your barn a sheet called a pet identification sheet. And this is something that you can prepare at home. And this has a picture of your horse, name, age, it has your contact information, it says who your veterinarian is, it talks about any medications the horse may be on, any special feed, and it also will have any behavioral notes. Things to note: is the horse afraid of large sounds? Is it a difficult horse to load? And so it's wonderful if you can have this made for all of the horses in your care. And one of the really important parts about this is if the disaster strikes when you're not home, someone coming in to assist in the care of your animals would have a perfect roadmap of exactly what to feed, how to medicate, who's who, and how to get in touch with you. Another important detail in having your red flag day kit is to make sure that you have enough feed and your medication and any grain or pelleted feeds together for at least a week. And so on a red flag day, you can grab a bale of the hay that they eat, 1 or 2 bales, as well as any baggies of supplements, and that can go in your pickup truck ready to go. Your hauling vehicle should be fueled, it should be attached to your trailer, and it should be facing out so that if you had to leave suddenly, you are all hitched up and ready to go. An important part of planning for evacuation is to have a place to go that is outside of the fire area for you, your family, and your horses. And so it's a good idea to establish a destination that you can go where you know that there's enough capacity to handle all of your horses and where you could stay for a couple days if you need to. On a red flag day, that would be a day to make a phone call to that person, whether they be a friend or a family member or a professional resource that you can find, and just let them know it's red flag day. And if you can load your horses up on that day and go for a ride. And that way, though, you have the experience of getting them on the trailer safely. They have a positive experience. They get to come home. It's not stressful. And it's a good way to assess your readiness to evacuate with your horses. It's also really important if you live in a rural area to make sure that you have a plan for 2 ways out. So depending on where a fire might come from, your ability to leave your property may be impacted by that fire. So it's important to look at a map and have a good idea of what your evacuation route will be if you're limited in where you can go because of a roadblock. An important component of a successful plan is to make sure that you have a way to have your animals identified so that if you become separated from them in some way, we can get you reunified. And there are a couple ways to do this. Probably the most comprehensive way to make sure that your animal gets back to you is to have them microchipped. And that is a very simple process. It involves a little local anesthetic. It can happen in 10 minutes. It's something your veterinarian can do for you. And it will allow you to register your horse with a microchip company such that any horse coming into a shelter or coming into the care of animal control would be scanned and they could contact you immediately. The way a microchip works is that it sits always on the left side in the middle of a horse's neck, and all we have to do, if we have a reader, is let the horse know we're coming, and then go ahead and scan up, and there is Sparky's microchip number. And that microchip number has a specific set of digits that tells us which company he's registered with and would allow us to quickly locate the owner as long as you register the microchip with the company. And so again, this is the really important thing that you can do easily as a horse owner to guarantee reunification back with your horses. There are other ways that you can identify your horse, and that can be as simple as braiding a tag into their mane, either a pre-filled out luggage tag or auction tag that goes in with a couple loops of a braid and elastic. This is a good example of a horse identification tag that could be either attached to a braid in the horse's mane, to a leather halter, or to the tail, a braid in the tail. And this would have your contact information and allow someone who found your horse to get in touch with you and facilitate reunification. If you do have to leave horses behind, ideally they're either microchipped or you have some form of identification attached to them, whether that be a leather halter and a pet information sheet, or you can actually spray paint your phone number onto a horse if worse comes to worse, if you need to go. If you do have pet information sheets together, you can go ahead and attach those or affix those to the area that you have left the horses behind in, so that someone coming in afterwards for shelter in place would know who's who, have all your contact information, and know how to get a hold of you. It's an excellent idea to assemble a first aid kit for your horses. It's hard to know what the circumstances of your evacuation will be, and occasionally horses can be injured getting onto the trailer or off the trailer. And so we like you to work with your veterinarian to put together a first aid kit that sort of plans for the unknown. And this can often include having a stethoscope available, thermometer. We like you to have wrap material, bandaging material for wounds, some duct tape for a hoof injury, good pair of scissors. It's not a bad idea to also have a form of anti-inflammatory, whether that be some butyrbandamine paste, and again, this would be something you'd want to discuss with your veterinarian based on the individual health of your horse. The electrolyte paste, and a good source of light is also a great idea, either having a flashlight that works or a headlamp to go ahead and get your horse cared for in the dark hours. So having a nice rough tote like this is a great way to keep these materials safe and secure. These cooler type bags are a great way to store medication that might be sensitive to high ambient temperature. This is a nice example of one. And this would allow you again to have your first aid materials in a temperature controlled environment. It's important to rotate out any medicine that's in your pack just to make sure that it stays within expiration date. And so a 6-month interval is a great time to recheck your bag, restock your bag, and work with your veterinarian to have the appropriate medications on hand. I like to have a headlamp with a good battery so that my hands can be free when I'm working with the horses. And I like to have a pair of good quality leather gloves so that if I am leading excited horses, I'm keeping my hands safe. On a red flag day, I like to have equipment that I know that I might need exactly where I can find it quickly. So a practice of mine is to go ahead and load up my truck with a pair of leather gloves and a good headlamp. I've checked the batteries on this so that I know that if something happens at night, I can walk directly to my vehicle, grab what I need, and get going. It takes practice for horses to be good loaders. And so a smart routine is at least once a month to go ahead and have your horses load up and have them have a positive experience. And you should do that under different circumstances, different lighting, different times of the day. On red flag days, we'll have you go ahead and have your truck and trailer hitched up and ready to go. And it's a great idea to go ahead and load your horses up on a red flag day. You can either practice the trip across town to your designated shelter area with the person that you've made that agreement with, or just take a spin around the block. But the more that the horses go in and have a positive experience on a regular basis, the more likely they're going to load when you need them. On a red flag day, it's a very good idea if you're either going to be out of town or if you're going into the evening hours to remove the fly mask, any type of sheet, anything synthetic that is on the horse, so that if the worst were to happen, they don't have a flammable garment that is going to put them at risk. Your safety is paramount, and there may be a situation where you have to leave instantly and you don't have time to gather your animals or to evacuate your horses. If that's the case, there are a few things that you can do that will increase the likelihood that the horses will be okay. The first is to designate an area on your property that has a defensible space that you can clear, ideally a sand arena, a round corral, an area on the decomposed granite that has a perimeter fence. And if the worst were to happen, the horses could be turned out in that area and you could go ahead and have a large heavy-duty hose and sprinkler attachment set up and you could turn on the water. Realize that if you drain your well, that does affect the CAL FIRE's ability to defend your home with water, but under the circumstances of a firestorm, it's more likely that they will be defending lives in that situation. So the use of a sprinkler and a hose, that's a personal decision, but that's something that can certainly increase the likelihood that fire will burn over and not harm the animals. A good rule of thumb for selection of your defensible space would be an area that is approximately twice as long as the trees surrounding it are high. So if you're trying to find an area on your property that you could create a safe zone for your animals, that would be one consideration. We also like you to fill the troughs, all of the troughs that you have, to make sure that the animals have water. You can go ahead and throw them one feeding of hay, but we don't encourage you to throw a large amount of hay into the area because they will often eat all that at once and then you could end up with a colic. It's most important that they have adequate water and that they have a place where they are unlikely to have their feet burned by the fire. Horses have been known to return to their barn during a fire, even if the barn is on fire, because the barn is a place of safety to them. So if you do turn them out on your property, it's important that you close off your barn so that they cannot return to the barn. It's also important that you have your perimeter fences closed so that the horse cannot get out onto the road. We don't want a horse being on the road to injure threaten or kill a family that's trying to evacuate. And so a perimeter fence is a necessary component of your planning for leaving an animal behind. If you have to leave your horses behind, it is important that you reach out to the local authority, whether that be a cart or animal control officer, to let them know that the horses were left behind and that they may need additional care. In summary, your red flag routine for your horses consists of making sure that you have your troughs full, approximately 20 gallons per horse per day. Make sure their halters and lead ropes are hung and ready to go, that you have a pet identification sheet that's been filled out and that is posted in the barn. You want your trailer hitched to your truck and fuel in the truck with the truck facing out. Make sure that you have an evacuation route planned with 2 different ways out of your property. Place a headlamp and gloves in the front compartment of the truck. Remove fly masks, blankets, or anything synthetic. Have 1 week of hay, any pelleted feed and supplements, as well as your first aid kit and your go bag for your horse in the bed of the truck. Make sure that you have a place to go, either across town or out of town, and contact that person on red flag days. Practice loading and take the horses for a ride. That will drill your and their preparedness. If you need to leave your horses behind, you should make sure that you have a designated area of defensible space that is roughly twice the size of the trees that are surrounding it. Ideally, attach a hose and a sprinkler that will moisten that area and help to protect their feet should the fire burn over. Make sure that there's plenty of water in the enclosure and one feeding full of hay. Remove any synthetic materials from the horse, whether that be fly masks or a sheet, and have your pet identification sheets affixed to the area so that we can make sure and understand who's who in the herd. It's important that you close off your barn so that they cannot return to the barn. Have perimeter gates closed so that the horses cannot make their way onto the road, and have some form of identification, either microchip or other, so that you can be reunified with the horse after the fire comes through. Having a red flag day routine will help to give you the planning and the practice that will increase the likelihood of a safe and successful evacuation for you and your horses.